Thank you very much for welcoming me. I'm very glad for being here. It's a great opportunity to share with you a type of research that I used to do in this subject, which is the contents of textbooks of history. I will try to speak slowly and in perceptible English. I will do my best. So, this paper aims to approach the way how the history curriculum of the middle school, the curricular guidelines, and the Portuguese school textbooks explain to the students the key components of the creation, goals, and functioning, the institutions and the action of the United States. In this sense, this article is the result of the analysis of the history program of 1991, still in force, of the curricular guidelines promulgated in 2014 that intend to be a clarification and an update of the program of 1991, establishing the essential school contents for each teaching level, and of the 10 history textbooks most used in 2008 and 2015, with the aim of trying to understand the permanences and the changes that occurred in these didactic tools in the last few years. So, what about the program, the history program? The curricula is in force since 1991, is a normative document and established the principles of the discipline, the objectives and the goals, the methodological orientations and evaluation suggestions, and every teacher in Portugal should apply what these documents say. What is the aim, what is the big goal of the document? Highlighting the European history and particularly the history of Portugal. In this sense, we should stress the importance given to contemporary history as a study theme, to which is dedicated one of the 3 school years. In this context of the Second World War, particularly when the paths of peace are opened after the end of the conflict, that the United Nations is presented as an organism that was created to maintain the peace, also explaining its functioning and member institutions. What are students supposed to do? Recognize the importance of the UN in the effort to maintain peace and in the promotion of the cooperation between people, and also knowing which institutes or organisms are able to work with UN. And what about curricular guidelines? This document first appeared in 2014 and it's normative and mandatory, and as its name indicates, this document is a list of the fundamental contents scientifically updated that should be taught to students, and it is a fundamental tool in the structure of the teaching of the discipline, as well as a reference to the members of the educative community. What is new? The program contents are bigger and the schedule, the timetable for the discipline is the same. And in what concerns to the UN content, it was also altered, since the students are encouraged to understand not only the underlying principles of its foundation, functioning and goals, but also the potentialities and limitations that are inherent to its existence. So, the analysis of the school textbooks was made in 2 phases. Firstly, we chose the textbooks which first edition is from 2008 and followed the orientations of the history program from 1991 and in force until 2015. These are the 5 most adopted textbooks in Portuguese schools, and we can claim that the vast majority of Portuguese students studied by these books. Secondly, we chose the textbooks edited in 2015, which were adapted to the Curricular Guidelines in force in September 2015. These textbooks will be in the schools that chose them for the next 6 school years, which makes an alteration of content less likely. So, in the first phase, these textbooks we can consider that these orientations, the orientations from the program give a big freedom to the authors, so they can choose which contents, which information, what kind of sources they select to the pages of the textbooks. And all the analyzed textbooks follow the same presentation of contents. Initially, it is explained what led to the UN Foundation, the main goals, the presentation of the main constitutive organisms, particularly the General Assembly, the Safety and Security Department and Secretariat, the identification of some of the specialized organisms that promote international cooperation, the ways of intervention of the UN in various areas. In the selection of the sources chosen for this theme, we can observe a concern on giving to the students an excerpt of preamble of the Charter of the United Nations, images about the main symbols of this organization, the definition of various specialized organisms, schemes that explains the functioning, etc. On the second phase, we analyze the books that will be in force in 2015 and will be used for 6 years long. And in the first approach, we can agree that there are little changes in the textbooks that are a continuity of the 2008 textbooks in what concerns what the authors. In fact, the script is almost the same and the content almost unchangeable. Instead of starting explaining the founding process of the UN in the San Francisco Conference, for instance, a new fact is introduced. They start with Bretton Woods in 1944 and the creation of the IMF, most probably due to the familiarity that the students in Portugal have with this organism, which, as we know, intervened in Portugal in the end of the previous decade. The explanation of the context of its aims, the functioning of the UN, of the developed action, and of the organisms that constitute this organization are presented in a very clear way, close to what it was done in the previous version. The biggest novelty has to do with the balance that is made to the UN action by intending to identify some of the positive aspects and limitations of the UN. And I would like to share with you just a paragraph of a textbook that says, multiple limitations have been pointed out to the United Nations in what concerns its inefficiency to avoid regional conflicts. The Balkan War, the Rwanda genocide, Darfur situation, or the American invasion of Afghanistan are some of the examples of these organism limitations. However, the UN contributed in an admirable way for the self-determination of the people, giving a voice to all the represented member states instead of giving it to a restricted club of huge potencies. Moreover, it promoted the economic and cultural development through multiple organisms all over the world. In what concerns the selected documentation of this theme, there was not a lot of creativity, and in the selection of the other sources other than the ones used in 2008. Some final thoughts. The United Nations is presented in its fundamental features from a broad point of view, giving to the 14-year-old students the basic knowledge about this theme. It is noticeable a lack of a more detailed explanation about the facets of the various organisms that constitute the UN, and also clear examples that allow the students to understand its reach. When the limitations of this organization are highlighted, very specific cases are presented. However, when reinforcing the happy cases, there are no examples given. And I would like to share with you two more ideas. The teaching and learning process is not confined to the use of the textbook. So the theory and the practical side show that the teacher makes all the difference in the classroom. The textbook is a tool, one of the most used and more trusted in Portugal, between many others that allow the history teaching. It is the role of the teacher to select the most appropriate resources to the teaching of the discipline and to the students. And finally, the class time to teach history in the 9th grade is not compatible with a more detailed approach to the very ambitious contents. In this sense, although the teacher has the power to manage the curriculum, the time that is available is not enough to approach the contents in a very detailed way, showing that much more than just teaching history, the teacher does in fact magic. So, thank you very much.